Well, here's a bit of questionable advice for any burgeoning young sex workers out there. Always leave enough, just enough, for ad money and hotel. Risky? Yes, that's risky. But it's something that I did sometimes. I'd make a lot of money, and then I'd spend it all on creation and execution of my shows, leaving just enough for ad money and hotel. Not lunch money, ad money. Because, you know, you get a booking, and then you have lunch, and then you're back and ready to rock. It's the kind of thing where you might get away with something, and so you chance it, and you chance it, and you chance it, and you don't want to jinx it by being amused by the fact that you're getting away with it, but no matter your piety, because one day you're just not going to get away with it. So I was in California in July doing my brand new show, Hooker PI. The San Diego Fringe Festival, the show was a wild success. I was selling out shows, bigger and bigger audiences every night. And in the end, I actually won an award. Thank you. But by the end of the trip, I was still running on nothing. But never mind. I was going back to Ireland with an award-winning show with money for ad and hotel. But then I got bit by the mother of all California spiders. They said it wasn't a brown recluse. The doctor told me I would have been dead by the time I finally realized, uh-oh, and I got myself into her. No, I wasn't going to die, but I was going to spend 3 days in A&E and have surgery on my pretty little bum. I was on enough morphine at this point that I walked into the operating room and I announced, "I'm here for the Kim Kardashian butt transplant." To crickets. And I thought, oh shit, I am gonna die, aren't I? But I wasn't gonna die, I didn't die. I woke up staring at the wall and staring at months maybe of healing, and so not being able to work, but having my ad money and hotel money to subsist on. So naturally, I went out to lunch on my way home. There is certainly a financial risk in the precarious work that is sex work. So when I'm out of work, I don't have sick pay. And you can understand there's another layer of risk attached to this, that what that might mean is that some sex workers might be tempted to work when they're, say, ill with the flu. So when it is good and it is opulent, it can be a bit of a false opulence because there's such an insanely high overhead. We spend a lot of money on work apartments and hotels, a lot of money traveling and advertising, and yes, a lot of money keeping ourselves healthy and gorgeous. It's part of the reason why people are drawn to work outdoors, because there's far less overhead and very quick turnaround. But for myself, working indoors, some of the risks that I face are that, for example, people know that I might be alone because it is illegal for me to work with another girl for safety. They know that it's illegal for me to hire a bodyguard. They know that I might be unlikely to scream down an apartment or a hotel, that I'm weighing the danger that I'm in with losing a good place to work, just hoping that I don't get unlucky the next time. There is a jerry-rigging within our environment that we do, a sort of jerry-rigging of the elements within our isolated environment working indoors. There's safety precautions that we take. But of course, these are things that I cannot share with you. For the outdoor worker, she or he faces more risks. So if she and her client are decriminalized, she can feel safe to go to the police and report her or others' abuse without thinking she would then be under police surveillance, have her clients taken away or her children taken away. She can take the time to check the client out, to go through her screening process, and to negotiate her boundaries and to negotiate condom use. Ireland's Dr. Friedman said in the Irish Times last week that decriminalization specifically is the best legal policy, the best legal framework for sex workers to protect their health and therefore those around them. And this is echoing the Lancet Journal, who said that decriminalization alone could prevent up to 46% of new HIV transmissions. Friedman also said that it's actually uncommon for sex workers to pass STIs to their clients because condom use is so prevalent. Indeed, I'm not telling you to not try it, but it is true that transactional sex can be nearly uncomfortable for all the barriers. So in a session, if you're using 1 condom, we might be using 5. When I look at the civilian world, that's what sex workers call the non-sex working world. When I look at the civilian world, it seems like there's a real lack of prophylactics. Like other body-punishing jobs, say coal mining or ballet dancing, we know how to take care of ourselves, and we do the best that we can to protect ourselves on the job. I've always likened sex work to traveling alone when I was a young woman. You know, because you have to keep your head up, you have to keep your wits about you, because you're going to be meeting and depending on a lot of strangers, and you're probably going to have sex with a lot of them. The closest profession I can compare sex work to is definitely nursing. It's just so much body. And bedside manners make it better. I had a nurse tell me that she felt lucky. She said she only has an unruly patient about once a month. Now that's in stark contrast to my experience as a sex worker. The worst of my experience being people being a bit rude. I have to say, if I were to form an opinion of men based on the sex industry, no offense to any men out there who have never bought sex, but the opinion based on the sex industry would actually be more flattering than my interactions with men outside the industry. But it is risky work. It is. And the stigma and any criminalization make it far, far worse. So you say we're criminals. If you say we're criminals or vulnerable victims or polluters in society, that's how the world treats us. Even in the media, if you see a sex worker on TV, it's generally the body in the first scene in Law and Order, right? Or it's an image of a working woman with her head out of frame. So this headless prostitute, it directly affects the social psyche. It insinuates the sensationalist and reductive and objectifying concept of selling your body. It perpetuates the mystifying and shaming and dehumanizing of what in fact are really just people like you and me with heads and minds. So how are we supposed to feel safe when dead hooker is still considered the punchline of a joke. So people might wonder why people would take such risky work, why people would take risky work. And people, in trying to understand that, they fixate on words and ideas like choice, as if there is a line in the sand, and some people simply choose, and some people are simply desperate. But in fact, in reality, it's far more nuanced than that, and relative. I think it lacks a real basic empathy to not understand that even in a very pressurized situation, someone can have autonomy and choose this work. What we're looking at are socioeconomic factors playing out. They have to do with trans issues. They have to deal with immigration laws. They have to deal with mental health and drug use and poverty and race and gender and class. And the way that these factors play out and the way that they often intersect means that, yes, some people choose this work because it means that they can feed their family or for themselves alone to survive. I was for 10 months without housing when I was filming Connected, which is the reality TV series I was on last year. I stayed with friends and in hotels, and I was sending emails to potential landlords saying, I'm a performing artist, because we know that's way better than telling them I'm a hooker. This is a good place to tell you that I can say hooker and you can't. It's in the same way that I, as a white woman, can't use the N-word, right? Sex workers are my favorite people on the planet. And we lovingly and playfully call each other hoe, hooker, whore. And you can call me a whore, but it's safe to assume you'd be being a bit of a dick. So I got a couple of responses from these landlords. They were calling me out on my bluff by omission. They were like, we've seen you on TV. We heard you on the news. We respect you, and we respect your cause, but we can't have you as a tenant. Or they'd say, well, your would-be neighbors are unsavory types, and we're just worried for your safety. So I can only guess that they didn't tell the other potential letters about the unsavory neighbors. So I became desperate, and I threw in the towel, and I started emailing landlords. I'm an independent escort. I don't work from home. And within minutes, I got a message back from somebody. Wow, that must be really hard. He was a landlord. That must be really hard, because most landlords, they only want to know that their tenant was only ever a librarian. But he said, we're musicians too, so you'll be in good company. And I thought, I have to go meet this guy. I didn't want to live, it was too far out of town, I didn't want to live that far out, but I've learned so much more in my life from saying yes than saying no. Even picking up along the way, saying yes to saying no, that's a good one. And I went out and we sat and we looked at the view of the ocean, and he told me he had just come back from managing a gold mine in Ghana. He had gambled on it, he had lost, and he didn't regret it. And I thought, this is my kind of man. So I moved in. There is a risk, an occupational hazard, of your clients falling in love with you. You know it's coming, and in a moment, you hear him saying that he needs to take a break from you, that he needs some time to get his feelings under control. And you're sad, because he's a client that you adore. But that sadness sits next to, but separate from, this sudden peak of anxiety that there goes your rent. There was the risk of shaking the foundation of all of my relationships. And in that way, it really tested them. Like I can think of one friend who told me she no longer wants me to hang out around her child. And my mother said to me that all of her relationships have deepened through having to have conversations about this. And then she went on to tell me who is ignoring her and avoiding her in the grocery store of our small town. She said, "This has gotten easier, but you need to know, Kate, it will never be okay." I knew my parents weren't going to stop loving me. And it makes me really sad, the stress and the worry that I'm causing them. But I thought and I knew that I could do better work, more effective work out. And so that's what I tell my parents. I've said to them many times, look, if throughout history individuals were more concerned with keeping people comfortable, nothing would have ever changed. We need to rock the boat. So though it is a burden that I thrust upon my parents, I thought that they as individuals and we as a family were strong enough to bear it. And I thought that what I and what we are fighting for is bigger than all of us. Because I'm fighting for women to have complete body autonomy. I'm fighting for sex workers to be respected and to be seen as deserving of having human rights to protect their health and safety. I'm fighting for not legalization, but specifically decriminalization as the best legal framework for us to be able to protect ourselves and others. And I'm fighting for sex workers to stop being so uniquely raped and abused and murdered across the world. So yes, I did risk my parents being pretty pissed off with me. I found out lying in the hospital that Amnesty had passed a resolution committing themselves to decriminalization as a policy to protect sex workers, and I cried. I called my colleagues. They were spread out all over Ireland as we tend to be working, but some of them were getting together for celebration drinks. There's a really deep solidarity amongst sex workers, and I laid in that bed, comforted by imagining inductions in Ireland for baby hoes. We'd teach each other self-defense specific to sex work. We'd have know your rights training for dealing with the police, some of whom are known to interact with sex workers with power of abuse of power. You can switch them any way you like sometimes. Manipulation and coercion, even in Ireland. We'd have mental health training about doing such intimate work, and we'd help each other budget. To make this work less risky, work has to come from so many different angles. It has to come from a shift in social attitudes. It has to come from taking sex work out of the criminal sector and putting it in the labor sector. It has to come from sex worker-centered organizations and harm reduction approaches to outreach. But all of these combine and form and interweave to make a support structure. So when I got bit by that spider, I was curious to read about spiders. So something that I read is that spiders don't only spin and weave their web to catch prey, but they also weave their web so that they can fling themselves freely in the air. So I like to think of myself as a graceful creature, but clearly we're going to have to work so hard to make a support structure and a safety net for when we take our little leaps with you. Thank you. Thank you.